Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism. This will be book review series number 130. Oh my. What's it taken me about 3.5 years to get up to series 130. Of course, they all don't have just part one. Some of my series, like the Blue Lodge Handbook, that's series number 61. I was just looking over at my bookcase. That has 12 two-hour videos. 24 hours. I take you through the rituals, the initiation, putting your hand on a Bible and swearing under threat of death to have your throat cut, and worse, blindfolded, led around the lodge with a rope around your neck. Quite bizarre. And so I've got probably 340, almost 350 videos. Some of them 2 hours, hour and a half, 1 hour. So I think it's safe to say if I haven't approached 500 hours of video time on my YouTube channel, including the sky spray chemtrail, dumping of chemicals in our sky, whether it's poisoning we the people, weather control, weather warfare, HARP, microwave transmitters. Who knows what they're doing to us? They are doing something. They are changing society, and I believe we're going to learn a lot about it in the Encyclopaedia Judaica when I got the brilliant idea to look up communism. So who created communism? What is communism? It seems it was the Jewish people. Not all Jewish people, of course. And a lot of them, Khazarians, might not even be Jewish people. I don't think the original Hebrews were white people. Interesting questions. Searching for answers. I just got a couple books out of storage. They were on the kitchen table, so I thought I'd look at them before I start reading from the Encyclopaedia Judaica under the topic of communism. It gets bad. The ultimate weapon, terrorist and the New Order, Jan Schreiber. So like 911, false flags, they are using terror events to be able to have the public opinion swayed, to allow the people who are bringing about the new age, the new world order, together. Otherwise, the public would be in an uproar if they weren't being deceived, beguiled, and distracted. A lot of people don't know what's really going on. But terrorism is a super tool for them. And it's working. And of course we know that George Bush, John Kerry, and many others come from the Skull and Bones. Fascinating tale. The secret societies at Yale have walls of confidentiality as hard to breach as though of the CIA. So I'm convinced, I get those epiphanies every now and then, that the secret societies, the Freemasons, Skull and Bones, Brotherhood of Death, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Council of Foreign Relations, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger Group, Club of Rome, and so many more, seemingly are all Luciferic. So that's all the secret societies and Masons. They are one and the same, with the controlled by the same people, created by the same people, as communism. And here's the epiphany. And that is one and the same as Zionism. And apparently the religion that matches all three is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, the stories that they tell, and the Kabbalah, and all that stuff, which seems to resemble witchcraft, sorcery. So when you ask the question, why for 2,500 years, as we're going to read in the Encyclopaedia Judaica, did the Jews have problems all over the world, which is admitted in the Encyclopaedia Judaica. It's not me. What was the common denominator why their culture could not assimilate with the other cultures where they went? Mostly Christianity, etc. Well, obviously, if one religion is worshipping Lucifer, it's not going to get along or assimilate with those who are worshipping God and believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Or they won't get along with the the Muslim Arabs who are not worshipping Lucifer. Or maybe the Hindus or Buddhists who are not worshipping Lucifer. Although in those religions they do have goddesses or gods of destruction. Just like in the Christian religion we have Satan and Lucifer. And we can read about the archons and the watchers and angels, Michael, Raphael, and demons. This invisible reality does exist, as far as my research shows. And it does involve all peoples all over the world. There is some mixing together of the physical reality with the non-physical reality. The visible reality with the invisible reality. This plane of existence with another plane of existence. I think that's the hardest thing for people to get. And there is an invisible government operating behind the scenes. Again, I suspect it's the three I just mentioned. The communist, the Masonic organizations, Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, and many others. And the Zionist, communist, and Masonic. And more. Illuminati. And you can get these books. They tell all. America's Secret Establishment. The Order of the Skull and Bones. Anthony Sutton is a great author, well known. And the Order of the Skull and Bones, prior to a name change, was called the Brotherhood of Death. So Jesus and God wants us to live. And even Jesus in St. John, the Gospel of St. John, the video I just recently made, 72 part 6, says he's added another commandment, that ye shall love one another. So that's Jesus's and God's point of view. Because Jesus says, God is in me, I am in God. And if ye are in me, I am in you. So those of us who choose Jesus, believe that he was born and inspired by the divine and crucified for it, hated by the leadership of the Jews back then. A lot of Jews followed him and heard him and believed him, but they were scolded by the Pharisees and the leaders of the Jewish people. And like I said, it seems to me that I'm firmly putting together these organizations all over the world. The communist organizations are everywhere, and they change their name. They control, like in the United States, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and are infiltrated or controlling a lot of the educational institutions, positions in high places, medical, movie theaters, TV programs, newspapers, magazines, porn industry, and so much more. And apparently this was one of the problems in the past couple thousand years, that wherever they gathered together, it didn't take them long to control a lot of the wealth. Disproportionate. So they definitely were after wealth. And were they using magic, Kabbalistic stuff, and beings from this other dimension to help them? Were they using witchcraft to harm other people, to take over people's companies and stuff like that? According to Henry Ford, in his books, I have to make another video on one particular topic, on how the Jewish people took over the liquor industry when they were coming over here after World War I. They were relentless, and then they would buy up these name brand, even whiskey distilleries in Kentucky, well-known name brand label, move it to Louisville or Chicago, and dilute it 10 to 1 with other kinds of toxins, even poisons, causing, of course, problems. But it was all about making money, according to the Henry Ford book. So when I was reading this book, which will probably be a video I make 131, The Guide to Zionism, I realized what an organization. And then when I remember the invisible government, the Skull and Bones, Brotherhood of Death, what an organization. And then when I read this communist material, I'm thinking, what an organization. So the three organizations are all linked. Communism, the Masonic lodges, all the secret societies everywhere, including the Illuminati, even witchcraft organizations, and Zionism. Zionism, communism, and Masonry, secret societies, Illuminati. Wow. That's a revelation. Takes a little bit of work to discover that. So with that said, I'm going to read from the Encyclopaedia Judaica and just make a video, what it says here, and have my 2 cents thrown in. Yeah, I got these books. Pretty good deal on the used book sites. I think the first 4 I got were for $20, including shipping. And they're heavy. I couldn't figure out how they did that. But listen up to what this says. Think about it. When I make this other video on a guide to Zionism, remember what I'm reading in communism and see if you don't think they're one and the same. And they control and created all the Freemasonry and other secret societies. Rosicrucian, if you read carefully, you will see it's a lot of Kabbalistic material. Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. Hermetic material. And there's not a lot that I think that is wrong with we the people learning how to use our psychic powers or communicate with God and pray. Because even Jesus said, ask and ye shall receive when you ask from God in my name. And then of course Rabbi Marvin Ampelman, and to eliminate the opate. The opate is the comfort and the help and assistance and peace you get when you pray, because God does answer prayers. And they don't want you to believe in God and pray, because maybe we don't have the same God, as Albert Pike said, and Manly Hall and many others in the Freemasonry, that Lucifer was their deity. Helena Blavatsky created the Lucifer Publishing Company, Lucifer Magazine. The Freemasons had the New Age magazine. So connecting the dots is real easy. But making this one distinction, communism, Zionism, and all the secret society lodges all over the world, the banksters, the Illuminati. Tying all that together, and of course that also ties together with the Israeli political Action Committee, or the PACs, Jewish PACs, which are the most influential political action committees in the United States, probably the world, controlling who probably gets elected and how our elected congressmen and representative, how they vote. Because if they don't vote as they're told, they won't be re-elected. And if they really get out of line, they will be discredited. And like in President John Kennedy, if they plan to expose all this inside secret organizations, they'll be assassinated. It's a lot of stuff to say, I know. All right, communism, the international revolutionary Marxist movement that evolved under Lenin. This is communism now. Lenin's leadership from the Bolshevik faction, Jewish Bolsheviks, created in 1903. So we've been under attack worldwide by these numerous organizations, the Zionist organization, political action committees, secret societies, Freemasonry, higher level Freemasons. The new recruits rarely know anything. And if you are a really good Christian person, decent person, and wouldn't do the wrong things or accept it, you'll continue to be part of the lodge, but you just won't move up. They're looking for those people who can be compromised and who will do bad deeds, evil things. Obey what they're told. Be trusted. So you have to be trusted by the devil, trusted by Satan, trusted by Lucifer, trusted by the Zionists, trusted by the communists, trusted by all these secret societies and their leadership, the top of the pyramid. So it evolved under Lenin's leadership from the Bolshevik faction created in 1903 in the Russian Social Democratic Party. So these people do keep two-party systems. They have this system of control of a country. They have something called center, the moderate Republicans and the moderate Democrats. That's the real control. And then out on the far edges, you got the Democrats and the Republicans, the far right and the far left, the extremists on both sides. They use these two things as tools to sway we the people. The real people who control everything are the moderates in the middle, who have the aim for a one world order and a new age. But whenever they have the need to use conservatism to battle the liberals, or the liberals and progressives to battle the conservative and religious, they use those tools. But the real central power is in the center. People we hardly ever see. Probably a lot of them are not elected people. The puppets, the Democrats and the Republicans. What we see is all to keep us distracted. That's why they make such a drama out of it. All right, here we go. Anyways, that's my opinion. So the Russian Social Democratic Party to become the ruling party of Russia after the October Revolution in 1917. So remember, after World War I, which began in June 1914, which came 6 months after the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, took over the American banking system, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. In December 2013, 6 months later, they start World War I. Germany was winning, and England was losing. See, we get the two sides again. But the central people are in control, and the central people said, we can get the Palestinians land. They'd have already been moving people to Palestine back then. This thing has been going on for 100 years prior to that. Immigrating some Jewish people to Palestine with the plans to take it over, as we're going to see in a guide to Zionism. So they had World War I going. They planned it. They took over the American Federal Reserve, created the American Federal Reserve, which authorized them to control the USA money. They got America into the war, loaned the money from their Federal Reserve to our government to get into this war using deception and propaganda. So we, the American people, still owed all that money back to their bank to fight their war. And then, of course, the agreement with the Balfour Agreement stated that if England won the war with the Jewish financial support and bringing America into the war with their controlled President Woodrow Wilson and the Jewish handlers, which were exclusively giving him advice, much to the dismay of the congressmen and the representatives up in Washington, D.C. Because I believe the president before Woodrow Wilson, the Jewish elites, Zionist, these organizations existed. There's no doubting about that. The communist organizations existed, just a different name. They didn't want to say one organization for communists and use the same name for Zionists. They had to separate it. That's why there's two names. But they're interactive, including all the Freemasonries and Rosicrucians and secret societies, Skull and Bones, known as the Brotherhood of Death. So they have a lot of tools and control, and then they control the Federal Reserve, which since 1913, I believe they crashed the system, whether it's a recession, depression, or a bubble, whatever you want to call it, scandal, savings and loan, 2008, to amass a lot of money and wealth and people's properties. So every time the Americans and citizens try to get up, they bring them down. And interestingly enough, from my research, in 1830s, 40s to right prior to World War I, and probably even today and after that, they were doing the same thing to Germany before they were doing it to the United States. So I suspect they were doing it to countries all over Europe. And even back during the Crusades, these same peoples were the financial advisors and handlers and controllers for kings and queens in the Vaticans to collect taxes and provide supplies for the 8 crusades that went on from 1000 to 1300, 300 years, 8 crusades. And they had the handlers, the same people. Advisors to kings, tax collectors. They were good at doing these jobs. Interesting. So as we read this communism material here, the communist movement and ideology played an important part of the Jewish life. I kid you not, that's what it says here in the Encyclopaedia Judaica. So I do realize they're going to sugarcoat the material in here to spin a positive light on them. Nevertheless, there's a lot of valuable information here. So it says it played an important part of Jewish life, particularly in the 1920s and 1930s, and during and after World War II. So the communists and the Zionists had everything, were involved in everything to do with World War I and World War II. And with the Masonic organizations, Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Club of Rome. They also were selecting our politicians from these secret society organizations. Wow, did they have control? Do they have control right now? And the answer is, of course, yes. Massively they have control. Violent polemics raged between Jewish communists and Zionists in all countries until the disenchantment with the anti-Jewish policies of Stalin in his last years and after his death. So you can't believe everything that's here, written here. Some of it's meant to not actually tell the truth. Remember, whoever wins the war gets to write history, and whoever created the Encyclopaedia Judaica, the Jewish people in Israel, they're going to paint it in a positive light for the Jewish people. And the 2,500 years of the diaspora, they're living all over the world without a country. A big issue. And they continue to be interconnected, even have congresses and votes and paying dues. They were organized worldwide for thousands of years. That was the problem everywhere they went. They didn't want to assimilate. They wanted a national homeland. Interestingly enough now, with the New Age propaganda and the New World Order propaganda, they don't want us to be nationalists, as everybody already knows. They want the walls to be torn down and mass immigration and to mix all the cultures together. No identity. But yet they're all returning from all over the world back to Israel, only them, not other people, to create a national identity. People don't think about that. And they're fervent about this national identity. And then they call we the people who want to have a United States, a strong country, extremist and hatist. All right. So Stalin, in his last years and after his death, with the anti-Semitic quality of the treatment of Jews and Jewish life in the USSR, Russia, as well as the increasingly violent anti-Israel stand of Moscow in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Individual Jews played an important role in the early stages of Bolshevism and the Soviet regime. So it said here, individual Jews played an important role in the early stages of Bolshevism and the Soviet regime. So these Bolshevistic Jews invaded espionage in 1917. They abducted the Tsar and his family, then executed them all, and covertly took over the whole country, and apparently proceeded to kill 25 million Christians and other good people. Call it a purge. And some writers say up to 100 million, destroying the Christian churches but not the Jewish temples. That says everything. These Jews were mostly confirmed they wanted to assimilate, assimilationists, can't say the word, who adopted their party's concept of the total disappearance of the Jewish identity under the advanced capitalism and socialism. They thus opposed the existence of separate Jewish workers' movements, particularly the Bund and the Social Zionist. So I'm reading about communism and they're talking about Zionism. So they are connected, same people. They were probably having some inner conflicts on how to get the job done. The great attraction of communism among Russian and later also Western Jewry emerged only when the establishment of the Soviet regime in Russia. So the great attraction of communism among Russians and later Western Jewry and Western Jewry emerged only after the establishment of the Soviet regime in Russia. The mere fact that during the Civil War in Russia, following the October 1917 revolution, or the counter-revolutionary forces were violently anti-Semitic, shedding Jewish blood in pogroms on an unprecedented scale, drove the bulk of the Russian Jewish youth into the ranks of the Bolshevik regime. So remember, this is written by the Jews, the Judaica Encyclopaedia Judaica. So they're painting it that the Russians were aggressive, and it drove all the Russian Jewish youth into the ranks of the Bolshevik regime. So there was a lot of vengeance taking place. Notwithstanding the fact, when I read about the other countries all around Europe and the Middle East and the Eastern Europe, Northern Orient, no matter where the Jewish people went, they had problems. During Lenin's rule, the NEP New Economic Policy, in the years preceding Stalin's personal dictatorship, and the Great Purges of the 1930s. So they said the Great Purges. So who got purged? A dictamony of Jewish life evolved in the Soviet Union and was greatly attractive to both the Jews who wanted to assimilate and secular Yiddish-oriented Jews outside Russia. On the other hand, Russian Jews enjoyed the opportunities of immense geographical and social mobility, leaving behind the townlets of the Pale of Settlement and occupying many responsible positions in all branches of the party, state machinery at the central and local seats of power. So when they did the so-called Russian Revolution, which was basically a sneak attack, espionage, abducting the Tsar and his family and other people, executing them. So probably a lot of the people Russia-wide were unaware what was going on. Remember, they didn't have the communications and internet and TV like we have today. And I hear that from some of my research, troops from other countries were sent in there to maintain control. So the Jewish people, Bolsheviks, took control of Russia, and then they said 25 to 100 million Christians and other good people, Russians, were murdered, a lot of them through starvation. On the other, a secular educational and cultural network in Yiddish and an economic and administrative framework of Jewish life, including agricultural settlement, and Jewish local and regional Soviets were officially established and fostered, culminating in the mid-1930s on the creation of the Jewish Autonomous Region in the Far East. Many Jews the world over therefore regarded the Soviet concept of the solution to the Jewish question. So that all these countries, including the United States, back in the 20s and 30s, they were having congressional hearings on something called the Jewish problem. So the solution to the Jewish question as an intrinsic positive approach with the main options open to various Jewish trends. Assimilation or preservation of Jewish secular identity, and even Jewish territorialism, and embryonic Jewish statehood. So embryonic, they were birthing Jewish statehood. During this period, the position of world Jewry markedly deteriorated because of the severe economic and political crisis in Palestine and the growing trend of oppression, anti-Semitism, in the rest of Eastern Europe. So wherever countries these Jewish people went to, Poland, Romania, etc., there was anti-Semitism. My question, as I normally ask it, is why did they create such hatred? I mean, initially in all these countries, they were welcomed. The Jews fleeing Russia were welcomed to Germany, were allowed total freedom, prospered, gained a lot of wealth. But remember, during World War I, the Jewish hierarchy, the leadership, turned traitor on Germany, made a deal with Great Britain to get the Palestinians' land, the Balfour Agreement. And then during the hearings and trials after World War I, the Germans found out that they had been betrayed by the very people they were rescuing and providing a homeland for the Jews fleeing Russia. Interesting. In the rest of Eastern Europe, Nazi and fascist influence in Central and Western Europe, and the economic crisis in the United States. So we had an economic crisis in the United States in the 1930s, the Great Depression. They usually have these depressions prior to a war because they had a depression and suffering prior to World War II. And they'll probably have some kind of crisis and suffering. We've already been experiencing a lot of economic turmoil. So they'll do that, and that helps them create World War III. They have to do something as a catalyst to bring about this new world order, new age. Something prophesized in some of the Jewish prophets' material. We'll have to go over that. Communism and support of the Soviet Union thus seemed to many Jews to be the only alternative, and communist trends became widespread in virtually all Jewish communities. In some countries, Jews became the leading element in the legal and illegal communist parties, and in some cases were even instructed by the Communist International to change their Jewish-sounding names and pose as non-Jews. So they wanted a Communist International and associated with the Zionist International, which I say is one of the same, who controlled and created the Masonic lodges, Freemasonry, Rosicrucian, Skull and Bones, Council of Foreign Relation, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger groups, so many more. So they're supposed to, the Communist International is advising Jews to change their names and pose as non-Jews. I suppose they could get elected in the politics in the United States, Congress, House of Representatives, and other things by changing their name and posing as a Christian or a non-Jew. In order not to confirm right-wing propaganda that represented communism as an alien Jewish conspiracy. So they had Jews change their name to non-Christian names, non-Jewish names, and be part of the communist propaganda establishment, so that it wouldn't appear it was coming from Jewish people, but it was Jewish people who changed their names. Sorry to get that mixed up. The Polish slogan against Zajdo Komura and the Nazi reiteration against Jewish Bolshevism. Initially, the Stalin-Trotsky controversy did not affect the attraction of communism to Jews. So Jews were attracted to communism. Though a number of intellectual Jewish communists tended more towards Trotsky's consistent internationalism than to Stalin's concept of building socialism in one country and subjecting the interest of the international working class to the changing tactical interest of the Soviet Union. The facts about the gradual liquidation of the Yiddish culture and educational network and the stifling of the Birodism experiment, Birodizhan, B-I-R-O-B-I-D-Z-H-A-N, experiment in the late 1930s did not immediately reach the Jewish public outside of the Soviet Union. So they had the revolution in 1917 in Russia. Basically, it was a Bolshevik Jewish takeover of the country. And a lot of Christians and other good people were purged, murdered. 25 to 100 million, they say. So what do you think will happen here in the USA and Europe whenever they kick off this new world order, whatever they do to bring it about? Maybe World War III, economic collapse, martial law, plague, some fabricated event, nuclear weapons. Okay, moving on. In addition, only a minority of Jewish communists condemned the Comintern-directed policy. So they had this organization, Comintern, the Jewish Communist Organization, directed policy at the end of the 1930s that branded any form of non-communist socialism as social fascism and the main enemy of the revolution. So they're planning on a worldwide revolution. They're well organized all over the world, while simultaneously seeking cooperation with German Nazism. So they were seeking cooperation with German Nazism. Even the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in August 1939 was a shock to only a minority of Jewish communists, except confirmed oppositionists, mainly of the Trotskyite Fourth International. So my point again here is that there's a lot of organization here, a lot of intention here, a lot of planning here. There is no conspiracy theory, there is a conspiracy plan. When World War II broke out in 1939, most Jewish communists defended the Soviet anti-Western flavored neutrality. But from June 1941, when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union, and the communists in occupied Europe excelled in anti-Nazi resistance, and particularly after the war, when the Soviet Union actively supported the establishment of the Jewish state in Palestine. So all this has to do with the Jewish state in Palestine. Communism and Zionism, and a lot of even the USA and world's politicians come from the secret societies, which are also referenced heavily in King Solomon's Temple, Judaism, Kabbalism. Secret societies. Swearing on with your hand on a Bible and having your throat cut if you divulge the secrets. What's that all about? What do they have to hide? Apparently quite a bit. Moving on. Jewish communists the world over achieved the highest degree of inner contentment and intellectual harmony in the whole history of the communist movement. The whole history of the communist movement. The relatively abrupt disenchantment began in the late 1940s and the beginning of the 1950s, when Soviet policy towards the State of Israel gradually reversed from support to hostility, and the anti-cosmopolitan campaign, the Slansky trials in Czechoslovakia, and the Doctors' Plot in Moscow revealed the anti-Semitic character of the Soviet regime in Stalin's last years. So there was the 1917 revolution by the Bolshevik Jews, where the Jews took over the country. And then apparently, as time went on, it seems that the situation reversed. Or did it? The disclosure in 1956 and 1957 of the brutal liquidation of all Jewish institutions and the judicial murder of most Yiddish writers and artists in the Black Years, 1948 to 1953, the growing Soviet-Arab cooperation against Israel, and the anti-Jewish policy of the Khrushchev and post-Khrushchev period, which culminated in the violent anti-Zionist and anti-Israel campaign after the Six-Day War and the Leningrad trial of 1970, rendered Jewish disenchantment with the Soviet-style communism almost complete. The new left groups that emerged in the later 1960s and enjoyed heavy support from Jewish youth, particularly in the US, France, and Germany, were not Soviet-oriented. So my point with reading all of this here this communist thing, obviously we can see where it originated from. Who birthed communism are the same people who birthed Zionism, the same people who birthed all of the secret society, Masonic lodges and temples and organizations all over the world. Secret establishments. So the Bolshevik theory, 1903 to 1917, the Bolshevik attitude to the basic questions concerning the Jews was formulated in as early as 1903. With the emergence of the Bolshevik faction during the Second Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Party in Brussels and London, the Bolshevik faction, Bolshevik Jews, which in 1912 and 1913 became the Bolshevik Party, contained a number of Jews who were active mainly in the field of organization and propaganda, that's the word that's here, rather than in theory and ideology, as was the case of the Jewish Mensheviks. Alright, so the Bolshevik Party, number of Jews who were active mainly in the field of organization and propaganda, 1912 and 1913. These included such people as Maxim Lintvenu, Walich, M. Lindov, Giorgio Solvinsky, Schultz, Gauss, I'm saying these names wrong, Gregory Zanoviu, Randominsky, Lev Kremov, Rosenfeld, Rosali, Zilaka, Helena Romovich, Yamali, Yarolinsky, Gubelman, Sharofman, Grodner, I can't say these Russian names, Russian Jewish names, Slokovov, Pananinsky, Jacob Shervdov, Vladimir M. Vladimir, Z. Zurovich, Lazvosky, you get the name. There's a bunch of names here, quite a group of people. Their number grew rapidly between the Russian Revolution of February and October 1917, so they keep calling it a revolution when it was basically a sneak attack. It wasn't the majority of Russian people having a revolution. It was some outsiders that came in by train and lots of money. Who do you think supplied the money? Rothschilds? Illuminati? You'd be correct if that's what you thought. When various groups and individuals joined the Bolsheviks, prominent among the new adherents were Trotsky, Urinsky, Volodarsky, Shklovov, Adolf Jaffe, Davor Razumov, Yuri, Loren, Karl, Radek. Most of the Jews active in Bolshevik ranks before 1917 were into assimilation intellectuals. So a lot of the intellectuals wanted these people to assimilate, but as we know with the Zionists, that was they were fighting the Jews assimilating with the rest of us for quite a long time, thousands of years. A couple thousand years, since I think 2,500 years. Few Jewish workers in Russia belonged to the Bolsheviks, and propaganda material designed to recruit Jewish members was restricted to a single Yiddish pamphlet, a short report on the Third Bolshevik Congress of the Russian Social Democratic Party, April-May 1905, which contained a special introduction by Lenin addressed to the Jewish workers. It was indeed Lenin, the ideological, political, and organizational leader of Bolshevism, who also determined the party's policy towards the Jews. In the period of 1900 to 1906, Lenin expressed himself on three Jewish topics: anti-Semitism, Jewish nationalism, versus assimilation, and the relation between the Bund and the Social Democratic Party. From its very beginnings, Russian Marxism under the leadership of Plekhanov had rejected both the anti-Jewish tendencies on Russian populism and the evasive attitude of the Second International toward the struggle against anti-Semitism. Brussels Congress, 1891. So I keep saying, this stuff's been going on a long time. On the subject of anti-Semitism, Lenin's attitude was at all times consistent. Not only did he take a definitive stand against it, but unlike Plekhanov, he was free of any personal prejudice against Jews and would never indulge in any anti-Jewish remarks in public or in private. Again, who wrote this Encyclopaedia Judaica? Trying to paint something in a positive light. What is the real truth? But again, I said there's a lot of valuable information here to show at least this stuff, this communist activity, has been going on for a long time, and they're intending on it seems like they're intending on some kind of revolution here in the United States to bring about the so-called workers' people's control of the USA, which is kind of ironic because, as we all know, a lot of the jobs were shipped to China and India. So what are the workers to do? Then we know that in the USA, Georgia, the Guidestones say they want a world population of 500 million. And we've heard a lot of talk about population reduction, overpopulation, unsustainable biodiversity, global warming. So it's obvious they would like to depopulate the planet. This held true in spite of the many bitter arguments he had with Jewish opponents in the revolutionary movement. Although generally relying on Marx on questions of fundamental importance, Lenin did not resort to Marx's famous essay on the Jewish question. So Karl Marx wrote an essay on the Jewish question. So they want to say Henry Ford, writing his books concerning the congressional hearings in the United States in the 1920s and 1930s regarding the Jewish problem. Because the stuff in the newspapers, of course, are the Jewish-owned newspapers, Illuminati-owned newspapers. The public isn't being given the truth. They're telling the story they want the public to believe. Just like with the demonization of Germany in the video I made on that one book, Germany Must Perish. And of course, then they were saying Russia had to be destroyed, Russian Revolution. The Syrians, Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestinian people. When dealing with the Jewish affairs because of its anti-Jewish implications, he rejected outright any suggestion that the Bolsheviks should ignore anti-Jewish policy and propaganda in Zionist Russia, where the Tsar was the leader, let alone make use of its popular appeal. Lenin regarded the Tsarist anti-Jewish hate campaign as a diversionary maneuver, an integral part of a demagogic campaign against the aliens conducted by henchmen of the Tsarist regime. I looked demagogic up, and what they were doing in the campaign, they were appealing to the people's emotions, not having a discussion of reason. Moving on here. Lenin, he believed that the Jewish workers suffered no less than the Russian under capitalism, and the Tsarist government And I believe that. I know a lot of people want to say some particular segments of our society are targeted, but in in the 2000s, 1980, 1990, I think a lot of people had equal opportunity across the United States and the world, except for third world countries, which were being abused by the international corporations. And again, all this stuff is controlled by the organizations, Council of Foreign Relations, Freemasonry, Illuminati, secret societies, and the communist, and the Zionist. And they only constitute a couple percent of the world, so the other 90-something percent of us need to wake up to this. They have plans for us. We don't have plans for them, because most people don't want to open up their eyes and see it. They'll show us all these satanic rituals and symbols and try to destroy Christianity and decency and family values, bringing about this new age, this new religion. Later, 1905, he went even further, pointing out that Jewish workers suffered from a special form of discrimination by being deprived of even elementary civil rights. Anti-Semitism was designed to serve the social interests of the ruling classes, although there were also workers who had been incited. And remember, I'm reading from the Encyclopaedia Judaica. The information here is going to be tainted a certain way. Not fair and balanced, I'm sure, as other books I have will tell, and what we've all seen with our own eyes, and from the information which we can deduce from this, that these people were organized. They constitute a small portion of the world population. They control more than 50% of the world's wealth. Some say much more than that. And they do want a new world order, a new age. They control our politicians. Our politicians are calling for a new world order. There's magazines and everything printed with New Age, even the Freemasonic Scottish Rite magazine called The New Age. I've gone over those in my videos. So all the secret societies, the communists and the Zionists, are all part of the same New World Order, New Age program, in my opinion. And there's much more to it than that, of course. They control everything. They said they were going to do that in the 1920s and 1930s in congressional hearings. And this book here, Encyclopaedia Judaica on Communism, is certainly providing a lot of information about what was happening, where it was happening, when it was happening. As anti-Semitism was clearly against the interest of the revolution, the fight against it was an integral part of the struggle against Tsarism and had to be conducted with the proletarian solidarity and the scientific ideology. And also 25 to 100 million people killed who didn't go along. And the Georgia USA Guidestones wanting a world population of 50 million. So a lot of other people need to be liquidated and purged. So when they do World War III, it will be for purging the whole planet of most of us. Lenin regarded the programs of 1905 and 1906 as part of the campaign against the revolution and called for the creation of a militia and for the armed self-defense as the only means of combating the rioters. So the citizens, non-Jews, were trying to maybe get their country back or defend themselves. He also waged a special press campaign against the program of Bialystok. Nevertheless, Lenin lacked a proper appreciation for the intensity of the Russian anti-Semitic tradition, the complexity of the factors underlying it, and the special role that it played in the political and social life of the country. The Bolshevik attitude towards the collective identity of the Jews and their future was theoretically part of their general views on the national question. Lenin did not consider nationalism a constructive and stable social factor. His approach to it was conditional and pragmatic, subordinate to the issues of the class struggle. At the beginning of 1903, he voiced the opinion that the Social Democratic Party was not required to provide positive solutions to the national problems. Wow. Such as granting of independence, federation, or autonomy, except in a few special cases, and that it should confine itself to combating discrimination, Russification of the non-Russian nationalities. The vague formula contained in the platform of the Social Democratic Party on the right of nations to self-determination was regarded as a mere slogan, designed to facilitate the organization on political consolidation of the workers in a common fight against Tsarism and capitalism, irrespective of their national origin. Furthermore, this right to self-determination applied to the nationalities having a territorial basis and did not refer to the Jews. Lenin knew little about the history, culture, and life of Jews. His view on the Jewish problem, that's what the word here says, Jewish problem, back here in 1903, 1906, 1908. So it's certainly nothing that was created here in the USA or elsewhere, was of a casual nature and was not derived from any study or analysis of his own. This was one of the reasons for the shifts in his attitude within a single year. In February 1903, in an article, Does the Jewish Proletariat, it would be the worker people, need an independent political party? He spoke of the Jewish national culture, a view predicated upon the recognition of the Jews as a national entity. So the Jews all over the world want to be recognized as having a national identity. And of course, part of the problem there is they didn't have a national country. So they had to birth a national country, and that was in the making, and they were shipping people, even back in 1903, to Palestine, immigrating there and buying up properties. This plan was way in play before 1903. And said that it could never be foretold whether or not the Jews of Russia would assimilate. So I ask a dumb question. I hope questions can be asked. If the Jews would not assimilate in Russia, would they assimilate in England? Would they assimilate in Germany? Would they assimilate in the United States? Would they assimilate in Canada? Would they assimilate in Argentina? And anywhere else in the world? Or are they one national identity? It's a concerning question. You know, you get top jobs in high places because of the Jewish control all over the world. The Freemasonry and other secret society control all over the world. Communist Party control all over the world. So you can put people in charge of political appointees and businesses and resources and everything else, military. Who are they loyal to? The United States citizens, these Jewish people, are they considering themselves their national identity with Israel now? That's been a big question that has come up time and time again. And of course, the Jewish organizations don't want that conversation to come up. There's nothing going on here. That's why I got pages and pages of stuff here on communism. Talk about something is going on here. But in the early as October of that year, in an article, The Position of the Bund in the Party, he voiced categorical opposition to the view that the Jews are a nation and expressed the conviction that in their assimilation, they want to assimilate, is a desirable and necessary development. He based himself on the truncated quotation from the writings of Karl Kunsky, the Marxist theoretician, accepting the view that the Jews lacked the two characteristics of a nationality: a common territory and a common language, presuming that Yiddish was not a language. The decisive motive behind Lenin's view, however, was the overriding role of the party in his conception of the political struggle and determination to base the party on absolute organizational centralism. The Bund's demand for a federated structure of the party in which the Bund would be the sole representative of the Jewish proletariat, the Jewish worker, the Jewish people, was regarded by Lenin as counter to his revolutionary strategy. Even so, he did not regard this difference with the Bund as closed to compromise. In 1905 and 1906, when the emphasis on the internal struggle raging in the Russian Social Democratic Party passed from matters of organization to tactical questions, and the Bund's stand on certain important points proved to be close to that of the Bolsheviks. Lenin did not hesitate to do everything possible to facilitate the return of the Jewish organization to the party fold. The Bund left the Social Democratic Party in 1903. That the Bund had even put greater stress upon its demand for Jewish cultural autonomy, anonymity, however you say that, controlling themselves, ruling themselves, at its sixth convention proved to be no deterrent. Several leading members of the short-lived non-Leninist groups of Bolsheviks, which came into existence in 1908, developed their own approach to the Jewish questions. So again, they admit there are problems with the Jewish people assimilating with everybody else, whether they call it a Jewish question or Jewish questions or Jewish problems. This is back in 1908. And then they were having the questions and congressional hearings in the United States in the 1920s and 30s. Why? What was the problem? And we know now that certain peoples control a good portion of America right now, as Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said in a heated argument in his Congress. Don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. Well, if they control all the secret societies, the communist parties, the Zionist parties, the Democrat and Republican parties, the banking system, educational system, medical system, money supplies, well, yeah, they're accomplishing their goal. They control our world. I guess we should just acknowledge that fact. But believing in God and prayer, God will win. Certain people back then, 2,000 years ago, rejected Jesus as the Messiah. I don't reject Jesus as the Messiah. I think there used to be a lot of good, even Christian popes. But I think the Catholic Church has been infiltrated and other religious organizations. All because of money and greed and other kinds of blackmail, sex, and power. It's been a long haul for these evil forces to invade our world and control it. And now they're mind-controlling the masses of people, even with electronics and propaganda, TV programs, movies, cartoons, the educational system. And most people are not aware of it, that their whole world and society has changed, and is changing even more radically every day. And they're even talking about a revolution between these people who have gone so far away from any kind of morality and decency. They want to have pansexualism and do what as thou wilt, and against the people who are supposed to be loving one another as Jesus taught. So between these two sides will be the revolution. So I guess we could say clearly we are under attack. Even with the sky spraying with chemicals in the sky, electromagnetic transmissions, propaganda in the news, threat of World War III, terrorism events, seemingly many of them staged, to sway the minds of the people, to allow this centralization of the world and control over the rest of us to come about. They're trying to do it slowly and bring it about without having to do something radical like a national worldwide catastrophe, world war, plague, economic. But they are moving it forward at a faster pace. It seems obvious. 911 was a big catalyst. That was a huge deception against the people of the USA and the world. All right. Thus, A. Lon Chomsky, in dealing with religion, found that the Bible, particularly the prophets, contained revolutionary elements, that there was a link between the Old Testament and the new religion of labor. The Old Testament and the new religion of labor, particularly the prophets, contained revolutionary elements. So the Jewish religion and their prophets are foretelling of what is taking place. That's important to think about. The latter being, in his opinion, an essential part of socialism. The existence of the Jewish people and the contribution it had made to humanity were of vital importance. Well, in my studies of history, I don't see where the Jewish people made any great contributions to humanity. If they want to claim that the Christians get their religion from believing in Jesus, they rejected Jesus. So I would say Jesus came out of Judaism, and even in the Jewish religion, they're waiting on a Messiah to come, and this new Messiah is going to help them take over the world to some kind of Jewish utopia, something benevolent. And of course, Jesus was benevolent, so it'll just be very interesting to see the benevolent Jesus come from Jerusalem and that area, Bethlehem, and the malevolent, evil, sinister monster come from that same area. That's just an interesting thought. And I didn't make that up. We'll be reading about that in the Guide to Zionism. Give credit where credit is due to that observation. Maxim Gorky, in his condemnation of anti-Semitism, did not confine himself to its economic, social, and legal aspects, and his struggle against it was not motivated by mere unilateral political considerations. His positive remarks on Zionism, first made in 1902, were reprinted in 1906. I keep saying, this stuff's been going on a while. And when I started my investigation on what the heck is going on in the world back in 2005, I had no idea of the stuff I'm reading in this book. And my conclusions, after reading a couple hundred books, hundreds of magazines, watching thousands of videos, press releases, so much work. I'm on my 13th year. And it seems we can total it up by saying the Freemasonic organizations and all the other secret societies were created by these people in the background who control the world. And these are the same people who created and control the Communist Party, the same people who created and control the Zionism Party, and the same people who control the money supplies probably around the world. The same people who want to bring us World War III, the same people who brought us 9/11, the same people who probably killed President John Kennedy, the same people who brought us World War I or World War II, and so much more. All right, he acknowledged the contribution of Jewish ethics and regarded the creative, maybe I should have said creature, but the creative power of the Jewish people as a force that would be of help in establishing the law of socialism among mankind. Is there any mistake with this just said? He acknowledged the contribution of the Jewish ethics and regarded the creative power of the Jewish people as a force that would be of help in establishing the law of socialism among mankind. And then I'm thinking Protocols of Zion, the Jewish Utopia, Professor Higger, the political Jewish pacts that control the USA, all these other monstrous, sinister activities by the people who control our world. And we want to praise them on their Jewish ethics. But then again, I'm reminding myself that I am reading from the Encyclopaedia Judaica written by them. So I'll have to just overlook those obvious contradictions in reality. These individuals stand on the Jews taken by Lunacharsky, and Gorky had these individual stands on the Jews taken by Lunacharsky and Gorky had a direct bearing on the attitude that they were to adopt the Jewish questions, especially on Jewish culture, at a later stage when the Bolsheviks had already come to power in Russia. I remember my biggest point I'm trying to make by reading this, that this communism was going on for more than 100 years. They talk a lot about Zionism in here, and a lot of it's tainted to paint a positive light on the Jewish people. And I love this one. He acknowledged the contribution of Jewish ethics. Sometimes some statements are just too bizarre. Go look up what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in Fink's Bar. Or Prime Minister Sharon said, don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. And so many more quotes I've gone over in previous videos. In the information, there are many videos about the Talmud, the horrible things that it says. There's another thing I found in this book here, under C. This encyclopedia is C to D. But they have one thing called commandments. 216 commandments, and I was reading those, and I said, oh my. We'll have to take a look and read some of them. All right, thus, A. Lunacharsky, in dealing with religion, found that the Bible, particularly the prophets, contained revolutionary elements. We went over that. After the 1905 revolution, when there were nationalist stirrings in Russia, Lenin came to appreciate the importance of the national question and its possible use in the struggle against the Tsarist regime. In addition to the slogan of the right of nations to self-determination, including separation, he also recognized the need to make concrete and positive proposals on the solution of the national questions based mainly on the concept of territorial anonymity, ruling yourself. Lenin was ready to advocate the creation of autonomous districts based on a homogeneous national, ethnic, and linguistic composition, even on the minute scale. So even in small areas, self-determination. Such districts, he assumed, would seek to establish contacts of various kinds with members of the same nationality in other parts of Russia and even in other parts of the world. The pogroms and the Bellius blood libel led Lenin to conclude that in recent years the persecution of Jews had reached unprecedented proportions and that no other nation in Russia suffered as much oppression and persecution as does the Jewish nationality. So the blood libels, I guess there were situations where the Jews were accused of abducting maybe a little Christian boy and using him in a sacrifice. I've shown pictures and talked about that. So yeah, I suppose that would stir up a lot of hatred. In a bill on equal rights for nationalities that Lenin drafted for presentation to the Duma by the Bolshevik faction in 1914, special emphasis was put on the lack of rights suffered by the Jews. He was not, however, consistent in the terms he employed with reference to the Jews. He frequently spoke of the Jewish nationality or nation as an example in the above-mentioned bill, nearly always in the context of a national question in Russia. In general, he held that the process of national assimilation, as furthered by capitalism, is to be regarded as a great historic advantage, and that the proletariat, the workers, also welcome the assimilation of nations, except when this is based on force or on special privilege. Each nation consists of two nations, and there are two national cultures. In each national culture, including that of the Jews, he acknowledged the presence of universal progressive qualities in Jewish culture, such as that of internationalism, and the capacity to absorb the stream of contemporary progressive ideas. The stream of contemporary progressive ideas. So here in the USA, of course, progressive means moving away from the Ten Commandments and morality and Christianity and moving towards an Aleister Crowley philosophy as do as thou wilt, where people seem to be a bit bizarre, even calling themselves weird and freaks, talking about pansexuality, sex with anything, bisexuality, transgenderism, all kinds of other crazy things, assaults on humanity, NGOs, genetically modified foods, fluoride in the water, vaccines with mercury and other toxins, testing plagues, biological weapons on the public without them knowing it. Even driving around Washington State with microwave transmitters, blasting it at people to see what it would do. Looks like there's going to be a big change. The government's against the peoples, with all their apparatuses to watch us and spy on us and eventually microchip everybody, bringing about some kind of biblical prophecy. Kind of crazy, you think? Seems like common sense has left the room. The latter quality manifesting itself in the high percentage of Jews found in democratic and proletarian movements. In view of his general attitude on the Jewish question and the progressive qualities, so this progressiveness, I guess we know where it's coming from. And Rabbi Marvin Antelman talked about it in his book, To Eliminate the Opaque. One of their recent 1666 messiahs, Sabbatai Zivi, even came up with a set of commandments that were directly opposite the Ten Commandments. Instead of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt kill. And even mandatory that you do something evil every day. So if you can't earn your way into heaven by being a good person, you have to earn your way into heaven by being a bad person. And halfway bad don't count. You got to be real evil. As crazy as it sounds. In view of his general attitude on the Jewish question and the progressive qualities that he perceived in Jewish culture were of a kind that implied the impending assimilation of that culture to international culture. So apparently they plan on taking this thing international. And we know that's taking place. Some of the crazy things going on here in the USA are also going on in Europe. I mentioned this a couple times, so I'll mention it again. But here we have the American Idol program, the singing contest. Well, Europe, they have Eurovision. And in 2014, Conchita Wurst won the contest. This is Europe now. With the head like Jesus, and they dress, and the symbols are right there in the logo with that sideways cross. And Zion, Eurovision, Zion, the rainbow colors. Look at this. Look at the guy's fingernails. Copenhagen, 2014. But what will people believe? That that's cool? So the world is changing. And apparently these forces I'm reading about, communism, Zionism, secret societies, New Age organizations, affecting our school systems, higher levels, medical, entertainment, economic, using terrorism, other kinds of fear tactics, biodiversity, sustainability, weather control, causing droughts, and so much more. The debate on Jewish nationalism, linked with the question on national cultural autonomy, as demanded by the Bund, increasingly became a part of the internal party struggle. So we're reading a lot about Russia and Europe here, but remember they did infiltrate and have infiltrated and are in America today. And they changed their name. They control, obviously, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, giving us President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as choices, as bizarre as those two choices are. It's meant to mess with our minds. Lenin held fast to the idea that national cultural autonomy would result in the weakening of the workers' movement by dividing it according to the nationality of its members. Similar views were also expressed by Stalin in an essay published in 1913 under the title The National Question and Social Democracy, later known under the title Marxism and the National Question, which had Lenin's approval and was devoted in large part to the Jews. Stalin gave a dogmatic definition of the concept of nationhood. A nation is a historically constituted, stable community of people, formed on the basis of a common language, territory, economic life, and psychological makeup, manifested in a common culture. Well, it should be obvious to anybody that they're messing with the culture in America, probably Canada, Europe. If even a single one of these characteristics is missing, there is no nation. On the basis of this definition, Stalin contended that the Jewish communities living in the various countries did not constitute one nation. I'd like to hear him explain that to the Zionists and the people who talk about the diaspora, where the Jews are dispersed all over the world. But again, I'm reminded who created this Encyclopaedia Judaica. You can't believe it really is the way that it says here, but you can believe all these conversations and things were going on, although you might not get the straight scoop on the details. Although every one of them might be described as possessing a common national character, they were to be regarded as tribes or ethnic entities. When the Pale of Settlement was abolished, the Jews of Russia would assimilate. There was no farming class among them, and they existed only as a minority in various areas where the majority population belonged to a different nation. They are therefore to be classified as national minorities, serving the nations among which they live as industrialists, merchants, professionals, and were bound to assimilate into these nations. It followed that the Bund's program of national autonomy referred to the nation whose future is denied and whose existence has still to be proven. Stalin, of course, also opposed Zionism. Unlike Lenin, he did not even have any modest positive proposals to make on the solution of the national and cultural problems concerning the Jews. So they're admitting here that there was some national and cultural problems concerning the Jews. My question again is, have these cultural problems disappeared? Are these problems existent in the United States? Is that part of the New Age propaganda, social change taking place to make us more like them so they don't have to be like us? Yes? No? In accordance with the Bolshevik approach, he did, however, agree that the Marxist stand on national questions was not absolute, but rather dialectic. So that means divide and conquer. Keep two opposing forces, depending on the specific circumstances of the time and place. Another prominent Bolshevik, S. Shumian, who generally opposed any positive suggestions about the national question, did in fact conclude in 1914 that under certain conditions it might be possible to accept national cultural autonomy. Only one leading Bolshevik, Helenita Romovich, is known to have favored such a solution at this stage in the history of the Bolshevik Party. Alright, I'll read a little more, try to wrap up this video. But the Soviet practice, 1917 to 1939, after the October Revolution, the Jewish problem, that's the word is here, in Russia caused to be theoretical issue in inter-party strife. The Jewish problem in Russia after the revolution ceased to be a theoretical issue in inter-party strife. Well, of course, the Jews controlled Russia, and the Bolshevik government and party had to assume responsibility for the specific problems affecting the existence and development of the Jewish community. During the revolution, Jews played a prominent part in the party organs, so the political leadership. We know 25 to 100 million Christians and other good people were killed and purged, a lot of them by starvation. The Politburo, elected on October 23, 1917, had 4 Jews among the 7 members. The Military Revolutionary Committee, appointed to prepare the coup, was headed by Trotsky and had 2 Jews among its 5 members. In the early years of the Soviet regime, Jews were in many leading positions in the government and party machinery, although as a rule their number did not exceed the percentage of Jews in the urban population. The number of Jewish members of the All-Russian Communist Party was 5.2% in 1922, 4.3% in 1927, 3.8% in 1930, and the corresponding figures in the Ukraine and Belarus in 1927 was 12% and 23% respectively. And again, what is the truth? I believe they did take leadership roles, and there was a purge, as they normally do in revolutions, to get rid of opposition, unwanted people who they can't change their minds on how to think like the revolutionary people think. And again, that's a little concerning when we consider the change taking place here in the USA, probably all over Europe. And there's already material that I've gone over, even the channeled material by some of those entities communicating with mediums, psychics, who are saying some of the people will not go along with this new age, and they'll have to just be disregarded or gotten rid of. They'll move on to another dimension. The legal emancipation of the Jews, which had already been proclaimed in the February Revolution. So the revolution in Russia was the emancipation of the Jews. Becoming free, taking over the country. Seemed in Soviet practice to be implemented to an extent unprecedented in any other country. Their unrestricted admission to the universities and to all categories of employment served both the interest of the Soviet regime and the needs and aspirations of the Jews. The centrifugal nationalist tendencies among the peoples of the Western border republics, which endangered Soviet centralism, inspired the regime to utilize compact Jewish masses in these areas as a counterweight which would swing the balance of the centralist regime's favor. The cultural Russification of the Jews played a significant role in this respect. In 1922, as much as two-thirds of the Jewish membership of the Communist Party in the Ukraine, here we talk about the Ukraine, was Russian-speaking. The Soviet regime also deprived a propaganda benefit, derived, make a mistake on some of these words, a propaganda benefit from the legal and political equality of Soviet Jews, in contrast to the neighboring status such as Poland and Romania, which followed as an anti-Semitic policy in practice and sometimes also in law. So Poland and Romania, there was anti-Semitic policies in practice and sometimes in the law. In both these countries, a large Jewish population was concentrated on the border regions, Western Belarus, Western Ukraine, and Bessarabia, that the Soviet Union considered as being only temporary, detached from its territories. So if you're wondering what all this means, this is the origin of communism. And it's trying to have some kind of new age and new world order culture paradigm shift here in the U.S. and the world. Of course, the big question is, which I would think that most common people with any brains would ask, is this going to be good for us or bad for us? I say, by seeing what I've seen so far and what I've read, it's going to be very bad. I keep saying, look at the Hunger Games movies and many others. The TV programming, the new pilots that are being released. Quite bizarre. Nothing sane about it. Even press releases out there by the increasing amounts of people who are becoming more and more unstable, mentally challenged, mentally disturbed. Then, of course, we're all aware of digital flat screens with flicker rates and maybe other ways of control, mind control, cell phones, towers, cameras. It's a changing the world. Anti-Semitism was branded as being counter-revolutionary in nature, and persons participating in pogroms or instigating them were outlawed by a special decree issued by the Council of Commissioners in July 1918, and signed and personally amended by Lenin to sharpen its tone. A statement against anti-Semitism made by Lenin in March 1919 was one of the rare occasions on which his voice was put on a photograph record to be used in a mass campaign against counter-revolutionary incitement against the Jews. The regime made every effort to denounce the pogroms and punish the persons taking part in them, even when they were Red Army personnel. When the Civil War came to an end, a law was passed against the incitement to hatred and hostility of a national and religious nature, which in effect also applied to anti-Semitism, including the use of pejorative epithet. So I only got 2 paragraphs to finish on this page, and I'll end this video. I hope you see that there's more to what's going on in the world than meets the eye. My epiphany that I got is that the secret societies controlling much of the world establishment, everything from the Skull and Bones, Brotherhood of Death organizations, the invisible government stuff you can go look up and read the books. America's secret establishment, the invisible government, using terrorism as a tool for this new world order, and apparently confirmation here that the Jewish culture would not assimilate with the rest of the people, even when they constituted just a couple percent. So it seems the other 90-something% is going to have to change to be more in line with this culture that's controlling the world. So the question is this other culture Luciferic and satanic, as it seems? And do they want the rest of us to become Luciferic, satanic, and anti-Christian and anti-Jesus, like the same people who rejected Jesus a couple thousand years ago? It's interesting how the simplest answer may be the right answer. It is what it appears to be. The theoretical approach to the Jewish question adopted by pre-revolutionary Bolshevism was found to be unsuited to the new situation. The denial of the collective right of the Jews to nationhood, the forecast of the desirable and unavoidable assimilation, and the negation of a Jewish national culture, and the use of Yiddish as a national Jewish language no longer formed a part of the Soviet dogma. Although not all of these formulas were officially abolished or reinterpreted, the entire propaganda network was based on a variety of views that were often the very opposite of the Lenin and Stalin's utterances in pre-revolutionary days. The list of nationalities, i.e. ethnic groups, in the Soviet Union included the Jews among the national minorities that had no defined territory of their own and that the Tsarist regime sought to destroy by any means, not excluding the instigation of pogroms. It followed that the assurance of their right to free national development by the very nature of the Soviet regime was not enough, and that it behooved the party to help the toiling masses of these ethnic groups utilized in full their inherent right to free development. Tenth Congress of the All-Russian Communist Party, 1921, speech by Stalin, revolutionist. Shortly after the revolution, Jewish affairs were officially included in the jurisdiction of the Commissionerate for Nationalities. In addition, Jewish councils, Soviets, were appointed on the local, sub-district, and district level. This trend found its clearest expression during the early stages of the Brodo-Disham experiment, 1928-1934, when the head of the Soviet state, Mikhail Kanelin, declared that the Jewish people were facing a great task, that of preserving their nationhood. Thus, the pre-revolutionary forecast of assimilation as the solution to the Jewish problem, even under advanced capitalism, was now replaced by a national and territorial solution under the new conditions created by the dictatorship of the proletariat, the workers. So, thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment below. What do you think? Communism, same thing as Zionism? Big organizations all over the world, every community. Is that the same thing they're working for, in cahoots with, or one of the enforcement arms, these secret societies, Freemasonry, Illuminati? They control so much of our world. Why couldn't the Jews, for a couple thousand years, assimilate with the rest of us? What is the cultural difference that is so vast that they can't assimilate with the rest of us, or they won't? Apparently they can't, because whatever they were doing, there seemed to be lots of uprising and riots, and even exiling the Jews from countries like Britain and Spain, etc. 90 different countries in 2,000 years. What's the problem? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And it seems to me I have figured it out. They rejected Jesus. And I don't know what kind of deity, but the Kabbalah material seems to be Luciferic, satanic. Even a lot of Kabbalists were accused of sorcery. And so I'm sure that not all Jews subscribe to the dark side of religion. And if you go look up Zionism on Yahoo image site, you'll see a lot of good Jewish people protesting Zionism. And I think a lot of the Jews who were imprisoned, sent to ghettos in Poland, were good Jews, probably rounded up by the people who controlled even Hitler, the Illuminati, the bad Jews. So that's how it seems to me. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.